I think there's a terrible myth around that, and some real misconceptions that in order to be profitable, we have to degrade the land. And in fact, what we see is it's exactly the opposite. And one of the main reasons for me personally, for what we do as a company, is this idea that when our businesses are successful deriving, our living from the land, it oftentimes improves the land.
Welcome to the LandTrust Podcast, where land, technology, and the outdoors meet. Whether you're a landowner, an outdoor enthusiast, or someone curious about the future of recreation on private land, you're in the right place. Each episode, we share real stories from the LandTrust community, from unforgettable guest experiences to conversations with landowners about their land and why they choose to share it, plus interviews with leaders, shaping how we all experience the outdoors. And now, here's your host, Nic De Castro.
This episode is part of our Outsides Insider series, where we sit down with the founders, operators, and insiders shaping the future of the outdoor industry. Just a quick reminder, our guests' opinions are their own, and they don't necessarily reflect those of their company or of LandTrust. All right, well, this one's going to be a little bit different. Normally, we focus on the tech and its use in the outdoors, but today we're digging into something a little bit more foundational, which is the land itself, the venue, per se, of all the outdoor activities that we love to do. We'll do that through looking at the business of ranching and land ownership. Because here's the thing, 70% of the lower 48 is privately owned, and more than 900 million acres are in the hands of agricultural landowners. If we care about keeping these lands open, healthy, and undeveloped, and the communities that they're in, keeping them strong, we have to care about whether those landowners can stay profitable. As Leopold put it in his 1939 address, the farmer as the conservationist, when land does well for its owner, and the owner does well by his land, when both end up better by reason for their partnership, we have conservation. When one or the other grows poorer, we do not. To help us give an insight into this relationship between land and landowner, today we'll be interviewing John Haskell, the owner of Ranch Right, LLC. 20 years ago, he worked for his first profitable ranch he'd ever seen, and it changed his life. Since then, he started, turned around, and supported successful ranch businesses that do more than just survive. They build wealth, improve the land, raise resilient families, and support entire communities. Whether you realize it or not, every one of us who loves getting outdoors has a stake in the success of farms, ranches, and undeveloped working lands. John's going to give us a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to really make this successful. John, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Nick. Thanks for having me. That's a wonderful intro you do. I'm honored.
Oh, well, we try to do our best here. But yeah, it really is, something that running the business that I've run for the last 6 years and getting to know, I didn't come from agriculture. I came at this business as a passionate outdoor, enthusiast, love to hunt and fish and do all that stuff. But over the past 6 years, I've had the pleasure of partnering and working with and talking to thousands of farmers and ranchers across this nation. And it's been really eye-opening. So you really, when you do that, you really do understand how important it is, the work that these farmers and ranchers do, obviously food, fuel, and fiber, but also for us, again, it is, the land that is owned is habitat. Yep. It is the venue for a lot of the things that we love to do outdoors.
That's exactly right.
And it's been interesting.
And I want to second what you quoted there from Aldo Leopold, which is this idea that often a business that earns its living off the land does best when it takes care of the land. And I think there's a terrible myth around that and some real misconceptions that in order to be profitable, we have to degrade the land. And in fact, what we see is it's exactly the opposite. And one of the main reasons for me personally, for what we do as a company, is this idea that when our businesses are successful deriving, our living from the land, it oftentimes improves the land. And I say oftentimes, by oftentimes, I mean always. But
pretty much all
correct.
The time. Yeah.
But when we are making the land better, we can't just make the land better and make a living, but we have to know how to make the land better in such a way that we can also make a living. And those two things can work incredibly well.
Yeah, that's great. So I know I gave you a bit of an intro there, but I'd love to, usually I start these with starting out with kind of your bona fides. So give us a little bit of background on you, John, and what's your history, where you come from, where you live.
You bet. So I live in northern Wyoming. I am a transplant to this area. I've lived in a number of places around the West. We came here from southern Wyoming, mostly for the more mild climate. We moved from 7,000 feet in the valley to 4,000 feet, which makes it a lot nicer. I have spent my time, as I mentioned to you before we got on, learning how to ranch well After spending some time having, really wanting nothing to do with it and not being interested in ranching, you go through periods where you see, ranches that are not successful, where families struggle and owners are, struggling financially, and, people are going broke and getting divorced, and, the land doesn't look that great. The animals don't look that great. Nobody seems to really be thriving. The opportunity, I decided to go get a degree, and I went down to the University of New Mexico, where I wound up working for a guy named Jim Brown, who's a well-known macroecologist down there, who does some really cool community ecology type work. And in the process of spending time with him, he was on the board of the Malpai Borderlands group. He was like the science advisor or something. I don't remember all the specifics, but he wound up kind of dragging me into this whole world of holistic resource management. And he, for example, I think one day drugged me to an Alan Savory talk in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
A few of these things. And in looking at some of the ground, like the Gray Ranch in southwest New Mexico, it is just impossible, if you have any kind of outdoor interest, not to see like, this place is different, like something is going on here. And these guys would talk about, how much money they're making and that sort of thing. And you're looking around and it's like, there's grass everywhere, right? And there are quail everywhere. And I mean, it's just, if you've ever been down in that part of the world.
Habitat, wildlife, and profit.
Oh my goodness.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
you're thinking, I'm thinking to myself, how can this be? Like, what is going on here? So it kind of became one of these, I need to know more. And he was nice enough to send me on a few different little adventures, if you will. And one of the places I got to visit was the LDS Church. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints owns a large ranch on the Utah-Wyoming border called the Deseret Land and Livestock. And same experience, right? You get there. They talk about how they're making money. There's grass everywhere, wildlife everywhere. Like, the place is beautiful. The fishing's good. The elk are abundant, And I won't claim to be the biggest wildlife enthusiast, but boy, when a person sees healthy land, it's pretty easy to identify, right?
Yeah, to give people an idea of the Deseret's like where Joe Rogan goes hunting.
Yeah,
so like,
exactly.
a guy like that can hunt wherever he wants. He's going there. That means it's probably the best elk hunting in the nation.
And it's, kind of a sorry place. It's 200,000 acres of private, right up on the back of the Wasatch. You're 2 hours from downtown Salt Lake, and it's just an incredible place. And the people there were really incredible. And what was such a great opportunity for me was that they were willing to share what they knew. And there were a number of guys there, Bill Hopkin and Rick Danver and quite a few others, who were willing to take me under their wing and sort of show what the recipe was, right? Show what the path to success was. Mike Meek was the cattle manager when I was there at the time, and we had a great day. We were taking some bulls down the road or something, and it was just kind of a long, slow, kind of hot day. We were visiting through the course of time, and he really, kind of step by step went through how land management and financials work together, and why it's so important that the two are paired, right? And why success in one can lead to success in the other. And he taught me a lot, really introductory things about, the basics of how we do the accounting and how that matters. And that one of the real unfair advantages of an organization like the LDS Church is they have a good accounting system that works well with agriculture. And they understood how to structure their financials in such a way that it helped them understand their operation and helped them be better in real time, right? We all know that markets and environments and all can change very, very quickly. And one of the biggest impediments to being able to react quickly is quality of information, and to have fairly high rates of turnaround of, okay, here's what's happened and here's what it means. And then to constantly be evaluating where you stand relative to where you think you want to be is really critical. One of the coolest things as just a entry-level cowboy on that place was every month we would sit down and go through the financials together. And that was the general manager all the way down to the lowest level. And we didn't necessarily get into all the specifics, but certainly, hey, these are the things that we can impact. And here's what the numbers look like. If we want them to be better, maybe here are some actions we need to think about to work on that. So it was very much, I got a view into way more than I ever had before. Got a view maybe into way more than I ever should have, but boy, the educational value of that was just fantastic.
Yeah. It is interesting. They basically had the back office infrastructure all there, and it helps that. And for a lot of people who don't know, and I didn't know this before I started this business, the LDS, the Mormon Church, or I don't know what the preferred nomenclature is, they're the largest landowner in America. It's like Weyerhaeuser and them, and they own most of their ground through a farmland reserve, but largest landowner in Florida, and so they own ground everywhere. So they've got it kind of figured out as far as how to make owning and operating ground profitable.
And they take land stewardship very, very seriously. Like it is not a joke. It is not a tagline. It is in every inch of their culture that the stewardship is top priority. And that stewardship includes finances. But when they talk about good land management, they are absolutely committed to that. And for me as a young guy in my 20s, it was really impressive how good they are at it.
Yeah. So that brought you, kind of into the world, and you've been kind of operating and working on other ranches. You're ranching for yourself at this point?
Yeah, it's a whole mix. So I've ranched for myself full time. I've ranched for other people. I actually spent a number of years doing what I think of as turnaround projects, where they were often situations that were not meeting owner objectives, and trying to figure out how to get there. And the fun thing about what we learned and what I learned there working for the church was such an important piece was getting a good financial picture. So it becomes pretty easy to get, we need a good picture on the ground, that sort of thing. We need a good animal performance picture, a good land performance picture. But often the missing link is the finance part. Most ranch-oriented people, ag people, they didn't get into this to be an accountant. They may have taken some business courses in ag business and that sort of thing, but the details of that are often kind of fuzzy. And like most classes we took in college, we may not remember all the details and how to apply them. But that's the place where I guess when we identified that as an unfair advantage, many years later, after sort of bumping from place to place and working on these turnaround projects, my wife really identified, why aren't we just focused on the financials? Because that's the biggest lever in this whole deal. And if the financials aren't giving you a good picture, the rest of it, I'm not saying it's fruitless, but it is very difficult.
Yeah, running a handful head more cattle isn't going to, make a difference. Whereas if you spent that time and effort really dialing in what are the, financial levers and all that, that's where all that leverage could be. And, you can tell me if I'm off base, but look, most people who are, again, now having talked to thousands of farmers and ranchers all over the country, most of it's multi-generational, which is amazing. Yeah. But what does that mean? It means that it's not like you went out, like I came and I worked in industry and I went to go start this company and I started from nothing and I started with, and I didn't know, I still don't know so much.
And you didn't know,
but it was a conscious decision. Yeah, it was a conscious decision. And I went and, the first thing I did, because I had started a company in my early 20s and it was a boondoggle because I was in my early 20s. But I was like, I need a lawyer and I need an accountant. Right. So before, we even had a LLC form, I'm like, I'm not doing what I did last time. I'm having, my finances from the beginning and I'm having legal.
Good for you.
And so, those are, that was an opportunity I had because I went consciously to go into this thing. Whereas when you're multi-generational, it's just like, okay, well, it's just through osmosis. You're just going into it. And however it's been done in that organization, and even saying organization is probably in some cases too formal. It's just a family, right? So it's like it should be thought about as an organization. It is an operation. And so, I've definitely seen from the outside, and we, again, we love our multi-generation families, and they're so key to communities, which I think we should get into as well. But I guess maybe to frame it for, again, the people who listen to this are people who love to hunt and fish and do this stuff. And again, as I framed it, 900 million acres of the U.S. is owned by ag landowners, and we lose. I think we lose something like we're losing a few hundred acres a minute to development. And look, I'm all for free markets. If you decide you want to sell, sell, and God bless you. But a lot of landowners, we've seen it with some of our landowners in the past, or landowners we were, on the cusp of working with, had to sell because there was just no other way out financially. They didn't want to. They didn't want to be the last generation. So I guess what what does happen if we don't figure this, if landowners can't figure this out, if ag landowners can't figure it out?
Yeah. And again, this is kind of a personal cause for me. After discovering, kind of that profitable ranching is possible at the level it is, then sort of my personal interest became, how do we help people understand this? Because there is this absolute misconception that, ag just can't be profitable. And I will say that a lot of ag is not profitable, but that is not a necessary type case, right? That may be the average, but it's definitely not the potential. And the interesting part about that is exactly like you're saying. So if we are not profitable and we are dependent on, the Department of Ag or our state organizations to and even private people to prop us up in our business, we are very vulnerable, right? There is a component of sustainability that is lost there as soon as we need help from outside. Whereas when we can provide, that internally, a profitable business can run forever, right? All other things being equal. Whereas if it's a business that constantly requires subsidy from outside, either from one spouse working off the ranch or from, a government program or something like that, like I say, it's a terrible vulnerability that none of us want to have. Now, right now, we're at a point in markets where lots of people are profitable, right? Prices for livestock, for example, are fairly high. The row crop world, they're suffering terribly because of, prices for corn and grain and things like that. But, we have a lot of ways we can insulate ourselves through our management from those market fluctuations. We can insulate ourselves from drought and flood and that sort of thing. And the more we learn how to do that, the better we are at running our business, the better we're able to continue. Now, we look at some places. I have an uncle that ranched an aunt that ranched in Southern California. They were in Ventura County. Now, you can imagine.
That's where I'm from originally.
Really?
Yeah, SoCal.
Oh, that's fun. Well, we used to spend a lot of summers down there on their place. And, you can imagine the development pressure is a lot higher there than it is in a place like Carbon County, Wyoming, right, where the wind blows 70 miles an hour every day and the winters are 40 below zero. Their place was a stone's throw from the beach kind of thing. So little tougher environment. Colorado, I think of as, incredible scenic beauty and agricultural production. But again, this trend has gone on and has been an issue for decades. There's a guy named Knight out of Colorado that's worked on this, Colorado Springs, or Fort Collins, rather, CSU, who's worked on this type of issue for years. It's not going away. I, like you, am all for free markets. I think people should do what they want to do. And if you own land and have an opportunity to make an incredible profit, you should do it. That said, having watched my uncle and aunt go through that, they didn't do it voluntarily. They did benefit financially, but I think that the toll that took on them as they were the generation that lost the ranch, took a terrible toll. That is not a place that anybody really wants to be in. And the cool thing is, like I say, at this point, we have lots of good options. We know how to do better than that. And so if we want to continue to be able to do that, we can. We absolutely have that option. And too many people don't know the option.
Yeah. It's interesting. I started this company in Bozeman, and I lived in Bozeman from 16 till this last year.
Talk about development.
Doing, yeah. And there's I think it's a particularly Western, because the West is where all the public land is. And there is a subgroup of Western hunters who look adversarially upon ranches, and they look at a few thousand acre ranch outside Bozeman, and they like these rich ranchers just closing us out and all that stuff. And it's just so far from the truth. And you look at it and say, if they sell, they'll be rich. It's called land rich, cash poor, and it's hard for us who are not from a multi-generational business or operation that is tied to land. It's more than a business. It is a business, but it's also tied to land and legacy. So your uncle and aunt, I'm sure they have multi-generational wealth from that transaction because of where it is and how valuable that land is. But the toll, like you said, it's not just like they sold a commercial building. Like there's no emotion tied to it. It's like, it's just a real estate asset. Like, great, we got 600% return on a real estate asset. There's just so much more to it. And that's what we've heard time and again.
Yep.
We have landowners that are, in and around Bozeman that could be, I don't know, $100 million liquid right now if they wanted to go do that. But he's like, I don't want to do that. We've been here since before Montana was a state, and I'm going to be here as long as I can. And so there can be a disconnect between, again, some of the people who love the outdoors and go and see this land and all the resources that are there, and what it takes to maintain it, even just in your family's hands. And so I think that's a big reason why a conversation like this on a podcast like this is important, because it's not just like, farmers and ranchers are out diddling around on their tractors and horses, and they've got all the, elk, and they just want to keep them on their land. In the West, it's elk, right? Elk are actually very expensive. They compete for forage. They break your fences. They're just a liability unless you figure out how to make them an asset. And that's where, business like ours comes in.
Let's dive into that just a little more because, again, especially in a place like Wyoming where we have tremendous wildlife assets, there is this absolute expectation that we as landowners will maintain the public's wildlife at our cost or something very close to it. And, we used to live in southern Wyoming and watching 1,000 elk run through 3 fences in a row, watching 1,000 elk, eat. We used to windrow feed, we'd lay it down and then graze it during the winter using a strip fence, and watch 1,000 elk show up and eat 200 animal days worth of feed in about 10 minutes and then do it again for the next 150 days. I don't want to say, I'm certainly not anti-wildlife, so don't take it that way, but there are days when elk are not my favorite animal, right? I would rather have huge herds of mule deer than I would have elk just because the overlap is different, right?
Yeah.
But that said, they're all, just as you mentioned, there's land rich, cash poor. Again, the vulnerability comes when what we also have seen as what some people think is the better option is the federal government or the state owning the land. And I think, especially when we talk about the states, people like PERC have done, good research on, what the federal government land ownership really looks like, what the cost is, et cetera, and how effective it is at achieving conservation objectives. And what you find is,
or ineffective.
Correct. What you find is it's very expensive and not very effective. When we have good landowners that are actively involved in the management, it can be very effective and profitable, which is a different thing. And I want to come back to that in a minute. But there's also this misconception that, we just need some rich people to come in and buy it up and then they'll take good care of it. And what we see over and over again is those people often are, I don't want to cast any aspersions, but they often struggle with land management. They are not as good as they think they are. And the saddest part about good land management, we found this out in Europe decades ago, is that locking it up and throwing away the key is not a good conservation approach. That often results in a very subpar situation. Now, there are certain cases where that works. And there are certainly time frames where that can work. So we've seen places, for example, where you fence off the creek and you get much better results for the first couple of years, right? Where there's a bank stabilization and some vegetation that can recover, et cetera, that in the short run makes that creek better for fish habitat and better for fishing. But when we look at that over 10 or 20 years, what we often see is there's an initial improvement and then it declines over time. It actually goes the other way. And that having well-managed grazing on top of good riparian management can really improve that and sustain that improvement for the long term. When we talk about these different sort of land management approaches, the sad thing is we don't dissect them enough, right? So a lot of times in research, grazing is a treatment or it isn't, right? Well, what type of grazing? What season is the grazing? What type of animals are we grazing, right? We need to be much more specific about how we do that. Back to this federal land ownership thing, I find it fascinating, and I get in some fights periodically about public lands. But the federal government is the only landowner that I know that has no mortgage, right? Has no real land purchase associated costs, and still can't make an actual living on the land, right? The rest of us all have to purchase that land and make a living on it. And so the comparison is a little apples to oranges, but at the same time, most of the time, the person who has to make a mortgage payment is doing a better job of managing that land. And it goes back to what I said originally, that profit and sustainability and profit and stewardship go together. Those are hand in hand, not opposite, not in opposition to each other.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more. And, look, again, in the West, it's not so much of a thing when you get out of the West, because most of the lower 48's public land is in,
Correct.
Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Nevada, that's where most of it is. And look, we're not anti-public land by any means. And it certainly is, from an access perspective, and this is an interesting conversation to have too. Public land is awesome for access. Is it awesome for habitat and wildlife? I could argue that. And often access and quality habitat and wildlife are inversely correlated, frankly. I could point to, let's look in Montana, and Montana has their block management program. Yes. And so block management is the state paying ranchers and farmers for, hunter day access to go and hunt on their property. So they're paying for hunting access. The state is, which means, people are. And so that's a great program. And their stated thing is for access. So it's really good at its stated goal, which is opening up more access for hunters. But I can tell you, like, having lived in Bozeman for a long time, there are some of those block properties that are, within an hour drive of Bozeman. They'll see like 20,000 hunter days in a season. Is it great for habitat and wildlife? No, it's not. It was great for access. You did get to go out today and you got to go walk on some land. And sure, there's an opportunity. And have I killed animals on block properties? Absolutely. But, that land gets beat up. That much traffic is like, it's usually inversely correlated to habitat and wildlife quality.
And this is another place where a lot of times extractive industries, ranching, mining, logging, get kind of a bad name that they don't deserve. And recreation, we think of as this, recreation is always positive. That's always a good thing. And
hunting is extractive by definition.
Well, it is.
You are taking an animal off the landscape if you're successful.
That's right. And but I will just tell you, and you made a comment earlier about people getting shut out. I could tell you terrible stories for days on end about, conflicts we've had with hunters who've cut fences and left gates open and done all kinds of, not helpful things. But more importantly, I think exactly the point you're making is that recreation is not a zero impact activity, right? There is no zero impact activity. Locking it up and throwing away the key is also not a zero impact activity, right? All of these things have impacts. And the great thing about active management is that we get to choose what those impacts are, right? And actually regulate them. I think you mentioned the block program in Montana. I'm a huge fan of the CWMU program in Utah. There are lots of people, and hunters especially, that, that don't love that program because they feel like it's, too beneficial to landowners. Well, from the landowner side, I'll just tell you, it's not too beneficial. It is definitely helpful, and it provides some great.
You didn't go buy your private island with the proceeds?
Exactly. One thing a person should maybe be aware of, if you look across the West at relatively large acreages, and it's been a while since I've looked at this number again, but average return from high performing wildlife enterprises is like $2 an acre, right? So just think about, I earned $2 extra an acre this year because I was a good manager and had this extra wildlife income, and I'm going to apply that to my mortgage or my property tax or whatever the relevant.
Right. Property taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's a drop in the bucket, and most people that are doing it because they love it. Now, again, I don't begrudge, you mentioned Rogan's hunting and that sort of thing. Like, there are people that pay big money for individual hunts. The trick is, how many acres does it take to find a 400 class elk or a 200 plus class buck, right? I mean, it's not a 1 acre deal. It takes a lot to put it all together. So anyway, I think the awareness that you guys bring, and I think just the approach of, hey, let's come up with a solution for this that is not antagonistic, is a great way to approach the world. That's kind of what.
We call it we call ourselves a land sharing marketplace. That's what we are. We are partners with our landowners. They own the asset. We build the marketplace. And on our demand side are people who would like to have access. And it's on a short-term basis. Because that was one of the big things that as I got this business going, I discovered, which was historically, if you did want to monetize the recreation value of your land, most of the time it's hunting. Like most of the time, any sort of recreational income is basically hunting, right? I mean, it could be fishing.
Bird watchers love
and if you were doing hunting, you were doing
how much they spend, but it doesn't go to land.
Yeah, they spend it at stores. They spend it in retail. They're not spending it on land access. But yeah, so it was hunting, and it was annual or multi-year leases. And so there's a benefit to the annual or multi-year lease, which is you get a check up front, and so you get a little chunk of change right there. But then especially for our owner operators, so most of our landowners that we partner with are owner operator multi-generation farm and ranch families. They really did not like the loss of control because basically you sold a property right away for a long period of time. And so great, we got some income, but now I heard this over and over again, whether it was Kansas or Montana or Missouri, whatever. It's like, yeah, but now my kids, myself, my friends, my family, my business partners, my neighbors, the guy who door knocked, who's got his daughter, and it's, I can't say yes. And beyond that, if someone wrote you a big enough check, they start to feel ownership. And so I would hear, my wife's from Dodge City, Kansas. And when I first was starting this, we go down there like, some guys from Georgia paid us $30,000 because we got big whitetails out here. But then they're calling my farm hands up trying to get me to change farming practices or go move stands. It's like, that's not what you did here. You just have access to hunt. Like, we're not changing our agricultural practices on your whims. And so it was just the wrong size transaction.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
I think by shortening it up and saying, hey, I want to come out there for a week. And at the end of the day, like, these guys go on one trip. They're going to come out for 3 to 5 days, and they don't need it anymore. And so that's kind of, especially for the owner operator who values control, I think, above almost anything else, is how we ended up where we are today. And I think it's why it works really well for them. And you mentioned something interesting about really wealthy. Some people think that just getting some really wealthy people to just buy up the land and preserve it. I just think that one of my good friends, I don't know if you know Coulter DeVries, but he is the Ranch Investor Podcast. Is up Coulter's a dear friend, but his broker, and you see this time and again. You got a bunch of money, you go buy a Montana or Wyoming ranch, beautiful recreation property. It's but it's like buying a boat, or it's like to them there's no connection per se. And again, we're speaking in generalities versus a family who is owner operator, living, working every day for generations. There's so much more connection there than it's not just like, I'm kind of tired of it. I'm going to, chop a little piece off, sell that, and I'll make money on my real estate transaction. Again, we're speaking in generalities, but you're not going to come in and just like, it's expensive. If you're not actively managing, like you're saying, for a purpose other than just recreation, not a lot of people have a lot of tolerance to spend that much money on a ranch to keep it actively managed just to show up for a week a year. It's really freaking expensive. And sometimes it happens, but often you'll see they'll hold it for 5-6 years, and it's like, all right.
Well, or what we also see is they may hold it for the rest of their life, but they haven't built that connection into their kids and their kids' kids. Yeah. And so then the kids are like, why are we spending $200,000 on, the kids are in Dallas, they don't have any idea.
We could sell it for $100 million and I'll make a bunch of money.
Right? Yeah. And this stupid land manager guy keeps calling us and wants more, he needs another $30,000 this month to keep, it's like, we don't want to keep writing that check. So I agree with you, but I think this is a deeper issue that we sometimes don't understand. And this is actually, I think, a huge problem in our society. And in many of the areas, especially where people are trying to do good things, is they forget about relationship, right? The whole problem with the woke thing right now, right, is it's like, it's my willingness or ability to act like a complete jerk in the name of a good cause, right? And I think we forget that relationship is the most foundational thing. When you work on a landscape, when you are responsible for making a living on a landscape, you know a lot more about that landscape than anybody who's just driving or walking across it. And if you're there
Of course.
365 days of the year, you know a lot more than somebody that's there for 2 weeks. And again, I'm with you. Like, I'm not running any of these guys down, but if you have to make a living off of it, you think about it at a different level. You get to know it at a different level, right? It's kind of like the difference between dating and marriage. We can go out
Yeah,
once a week for dinner and have a great time. Everything can be fine. But boy, we spend 24 hours a day, 365 days a year together. Like, we're going to learn a little more about how we do this, right? So I think that the
totally.
importance of that relationship can't be overstated. And the other thing I think that we've gotten into with the general environmental movement is this don't touch type thing. My children benefit by the fact that they're dirty. Like, my kids are
Yeah.
covered in dirt when they come home every night, right? They play outside. They are touching stuff. They're probably doing lots of things they really shouldn't be doing, but they are developing a real tactile understanding of what land is, right? Of what animals are, of what plants are. They're seeing those relationships up close. They can feel it. And I think when we get past some of the intellectual understanding, which we obviously need, to that feel understanding or that more intuitive level, I think we have an opportunity to be much more successful. It's also a place where federal land management fails, right? We have huge turnover in our local management staff. You often wind up with a bunch of people making decisions that don't have any connection. There's no relationship, there's no tie, there's no intimate knowledge. And again, not to run them down, there are tons of great land management in the federal and state management systems. But a big component of that system is it takes away the connection, continually breaks those connections. Sometimes that's a positive, right? Sometimes getting a fresh set of eyes is a good thing. But we see lots of cases where the fresh set of eyes is, no, that's definitely not going to work.
Yeah, and we've kind of talked about what can happen if ranch operations. We could just call them agricultural operations, farms or ranches aren't profitable, aren't be able to be profitable, and it's the obvious, again, the most impactful to, from a selfish perspective to people who love the outdoors, is that land gets sold and often it gets developed. And once something's developed, I've never seen anything get undeveloped. I've never seen it. I mean, maybe, but it's never happened. So that's a loss of habitat for the rest of time until maybe something else changes. So that's, from a selfish perspective, you're like, oh, well, I just lost, that acreage to subdivision or whatever else.
And let's be real honest. But we need places for people to live, right? Many of us who like to access the outdoors also complain about the cost of housing and that sort of thing. And it's like, well, we're going to have to find a balance here between the two.
That's right. There's a balance, and and we have to be pragmatic about that. And so there's that. But then you also look at, a lot of these small communities, and I've been out in the Sandhills of Nebraska, and you go to a town and 30, 40 people. If a family or two moves out, like, you lose services. Mm-hmm. These communities just fall apart. Like, you can lose a school, you could lose a emergency ER, you could lose medical services, and so there are these community aspects too, other than just the land and habitat and wildlife and agriculture, where it's just like, man, some of these places are really small, really rural. You lose a family or two, and it kind of is the last thread that gets pulled. And I know, like, up in Montana, with what's that group that is private money going up and buying American Prairie Reserve? The APR. Like, I found myself very kind of neutral on it because it is free market, right? They're coming in, they're paying market price. It's a willing buyer, willing seller. So who am I to say you family can't sell your
better
place?
Than eminent domain,
but then,
right? So that's
that's right. But then I also absolutely hear the frustration. Because it is a bit of that, like, they want to turn it into American Serengeti, like, hands off. Also, you lose those families, like I'm saying, in these tiny communities, rural communities. It's like, all right, they're gone, and now we might lose services, and the kind of social kind of fabric falls apart.
Yeah, and again, we make a mistake, I think, when we undervalue that, right? Because
totally,
because that's the real connection, and that's the real continuity. Over long periods of time, right? Over generational type periods of time. These types of ideas have been around forever. I was a teenager. I did a little bit of college at University of Montana in Missoula, and having lived south of there, and decided to go to college, and would go to lectures that would the Craigheads would put on there at the Craighead Institute, and they were all about this type of conservation approach. And I guess I've gotten to a point in my life where I don't see the value. There, yes,
Yeah.
you are preserving some things, without a doubt. But what you give up is the core of it, right? You wind up almost missing the meat for the broth, and that's the part that makes me sad. And I feel like lots of people don't quite understand that. And I don't want to overstate it. Look, again, there are places where we could do a lot better.
Sure.
That's without a doubt. But I think when we lose the connection, our hope of doing better gets to be much less. And as good as scientists are, take the Craigheads as an example, right? These guys have worked in the outdoors for generations, right? And for long periods of time, and have lots of great knowledge, but they have a very different type of knowledge than someone who eats off that land, right? Who provides for their family off of that land. It's a very, very different thing.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, tell me from your perspective now, you've had a lot of experience through your business and through your kind of your history on a bunch of different operations. How should, production ag operations, whether they be farms or ranches, how should they view wildlife and recreation? Like, what part is it part of the mix? How should it be perceived?
Yeah. So the beautiful thing about it is recreation, and you guys are become an important part of this, can be what we call concessionized, meaning if lots of people talk about diversity in agriculture, and I kind of don't believe in that as much as most people do. I think we have to be very focused on our core business. We have to keep the main thing, and we need to be really good at that. And that's hard enough as it is. The beautiful thing about recreation is we can often partner with someone else who can kind of manage that and provide us some additional income so that we can, make our financial commitments. But it's relatively easy to offload that onto someone else. And it does a couple of things for us. One benefit is financial. The other is social, right? It gives us an opportunity to show and explain to other people why what we do is valuable and helpful and not negative. But what we have seen a trend recently where we have people that have too many enterprises, and they wind up getting spread too thin. Interestingly, hunting is one that, if mixed in with a cow-calf or a stocker or a sheep operation, or even a farming operation, can fit in really well and not cause the same types of problems that some other enterprises do. You look at the intensity level of running something, even an Airbnb, right? Compared to, hey, I'm going to start running chickens on my cropland. Like, okay, well, now we've added a huge amount of labor. The Airbnb is plenty of labor, but it's a huge amount of labor. And if we can do more of a turnkey recreation thing where you're going to show up and go birding for the day or go hunting for the day,
DIY,
correct.
Yeah.
I don't have to. I don't have to be there watching that. I don't have to put the sheets in the dryer, that kind of thing. And I certainly don't have to be checking chicken waters 4 times a day when it's 90 degrees. So I think what we see is most of the businesses we work with are most successful with somewhere between 2 and 5 enterprises. And it depends on the structure of the business and the family, right? Some of these multi-generational things, right? A new family member will come home and they will start their own enterprise. Well, that's a little different than mom and pop trying to run 5 enterprises by themselves. But if we have a cow-calf enterprise and maybe a stocker enterprise and a hunting enterprise, those can be very, very successful ranches. And again, I'll go back to the LDS Church, a very large, very successful landowner. That's a combination they run regularly, and it works. The cool thing is especially when we get into different types of managed grazing, and we're talking about, ungulates and game birds and that sort of thing, those things go very well together. I have never seen as many sage grouse as I have seen on well-managed ranch land. I've spent a lot of time on the BLM and Forest Service properties. If you want to see
deserts,
you want to see sage grouse, go to Deseret. You want to see sage grouse, go to Carbon County, Wyoming. You have places there where people do a good job managing the land, and the wildlife absolutely respond. And the great thing about wildlife is they move around a lot, so they can vote with their feet, right?
Yeah. I think your social connection point, I think, is one of the things that from an ethos perspective, of course, we want to run a profitable business,
Absolutely.
and we're working our way to get there. But reconnecting the 99% of us now in the U.S. who are not producers with producers, I think is so important. Nothing could better diffuse, or I hate the word debunk, but you know what I'm saying? Like all
Absolutely.
the BS the BS that they see on a Netflix episode, how farmers and ranchers are killing. No, then they go out and actually meet you. They see your place. They see the wildlife. Like this doesn't seem to jive with what I've been propagandized
Sierra Club
with.
told me that this would look different. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think in beyond that, which is like the advocacy or whatever they say, we're also talking about really rural people. And I don't think that our landowners expected to enjoy the social interaction as much as they do. And you'll see it. We've had thousands of reviews over the past 6 years, and you'll see paragraphs about how, the patriarch showed people around and shared all. Like, there is something very gratifying to share land with people who appreciate what you have, and because it's every day to you by definition. You grew up there your whole life. It could be the most beautiful property on the planet. And it's just like, well, whatever, I'm just going to do my work. And then you have people come in with fresh eyes and see your place. I'm like, wow, appreciate everything. I think that is very underrated. It's an intrinsic, it's not extrinsic, it's intrinsic.
But it goes both ways, because we have had the experience multiple times of somebody new from out of town comes and they make a comment about something, and it's like, never thought about that. Like, that's interesting. And sometimes that fresh set of eyes can bring you something where it's like, oh, I never, for example, I never really noticed that we have a bunch of grandpa's old equipment rotting behind the house. Like, it's just been part of the landscape since 1930.
Right.
And then it's like, what if we just got rid of all that crap? This place would look a lot nicer, There are all kinds of things like that where just a fresh set of eyes makes a big difference. And I'll tell you this, I used to, especially when I was a cowboy, and I used to think that I was a real extrovert, right? Because going to socialize on a weekend was a wonderfully fun thing to do. Now that I talk to people all day long, I realize I'm not an extrovert. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I need a little of both. And, we don't get feedback when we're out on the land. You can be doing a great job. Nobody else sees the sage grouse that we see, right? Nobody else sees all these other fun things. And when you get to share that with somebody, it's a real point of pride, right? I mean,
with somebody whose whole passion is tied to that thing. We got landowners in the Sandhills of Nebraska, and they got prairie chickens and pheasant and stuff like that, and turkeys. And, which they don't really, not that they don't like them, but it's just, again, you're so busy with 50 different things.
And
it's not really a focus.
These are in my driveway.
You see them every day. And then you get bird hunters. You get bird hunters who come out, and they just like, their whole passion in life is that thing that you have and you've done really well. And they say, this is the best thing I've ever had. It's the best trip I've ever had. And so like, it really is that acknowledgement. It's a byproduct of the thing that you've been doing well, but it's like the main focus of these people coming out. This is really interesting.
It's a lot of fun. It enriches life in the middle of nowhere, right? I mean, that's one of those things where having somebody come from New York City and tell you about their life and asking you, it's like, oh my, I never even thought of that sort of thing. Like, okay, great. This is fun.
Yeah, totally. Well, I guess, we'll getting towards the end here. What are the sticking points? So your business, Ranch Right, is obviously helping, agricultural landowners figure out their operation, and get it to be profitable and to serve, have the land serve you and you serve the land, kind of what we talked about in the beginning. What are the common stumbling blocks, sticking points, challenges that are in the way from these ag operations? Most of the time, they're families to achieving that goal.
So what we've decided to focus on, there are a couple of them, but what we have decided to focus on is the business side, how to run the business, and specifically how to really be good at the financials. So one of our big pushes, and this is a public thing as well as a private thing, so we have a YouTube channel where we push out free stuff on this very topic, really is focused around financial literacy and business literacy. Most of us are not thoroughly trained in that sort of thing. There are lots of people that will help with grazing management. There are a lot of people that will help with nutrition and animal performance and the other parts of our business. But what we've found is our niche is the financial part and really the business part. So how do we structure the business? How do we organize the business? How do we fund the business? And then how is that business performing? So if you look at our YouTube channel, right, we have our Foundations of Financials webinar series. We do a podcast, Ranchonomics, again, primarily focused on business topics. That for us is the weak point that most of us could be better educated on, which will help us actually be better managers. What we keep seeing over and over again is that ranch managers who've, especially those that have kind of grown up in it. I'm not talking about business people that have bought a ranch late in life. That's a different thing. Yeah. But if we grow up on a ranch and then we leave and do a 10-year career in finance in San Francisco or New York or Chicago, and then come back to the ranch, those people come back with a level of financial literacy that allows them sort of an X-ray vision through the business to see, how does this impact my cash flow? How does this impact my ability to service debt? How does this impact my ability to, fund my kids' college or, whatever else? And that type of X-ray vision really is an unfair advantage in our industry. I think it's actually an unfair advantage throughout all of small business. You're involved in a number of businesses, right? I mean, you and I both know small business people who are great at their craft, but they don't understand finance.
Right.
And that's the piece I feel like we want to tackle 100% head on. Ranching for Profit does a great job of providing an introduction into that. They really do get people started. After we're up and running and kind of have our basics under us, then we can go a lot deeper than that. And if we're talking about preserving a successful business or creating a successful business that's going to generate cash flow for generations to come, we've got to really get into the weeds of that and understand how it works. And we've got to teach our children how to do that, right? We teach our kids how to ride horses and work cows and brand and do that sort of thing. We've got to teach them how to manage money. We've got to teach them how to understand debt, how to think about their operation in terms of cash flow, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And again, to put a bow on it, from the type of audience that listens to this, generational cash flows from land means that land is continuing to stay in ag operations and is habitat and is a venue for the things that we love to do. So that's why this conversation is so important. We have to make sure that we're supporting and understanding these things. And maybe it can also ease some of this. Again, there is some social tension, especially in the West, with some subgroups of hunters and landowners. But it's just... we all want the same thing. We should want the same thing, even if you don't think you do.
Well, and again,
private land ownership is really good for habitat and wildlife.
That a lot of those conflicts are greatly reduced when we actually talk to people, right? It's super easy on social media for these things to get, way warped one way or another. But most of the time, what you find is when you get people in the same room and you really explore what they actually want, they do want the same thing or something so similar that it's like, all right, we can accommodate these two things within one picture. The divisions happen when we're not together, right? The division happens when there is no relationship,
absolutely.
Right. And that's kind of where we've gotten to in our discourse at this point. We can't even visit about these things. But again, it's been the same since the 80s, the Sagebrush Rebellion in the Southwest, all of the conflicts we had, in Nevada a couple of years ago, in Oregon, those sorts of things. That's what happens when there is no relationship and it's not an improvement.
That's right. Yeah, and we started with a kind of Leopold quote because there's a lot of folks who are, love conservation. Aldo Leopold, kind of the father of American conservation. Yep. And we can kind of end on one, which is conservation will ultimately boil down to rewarding the private landowner who conserves the public interest. And really what we're talking about, this whole conversation is that. A herd of elk on your property is a liability. If you look, if it's just from that perspective, you bought that hay, I'm pretty sure. I don't think you got it for free from somebody, and they went and ate it all. So imagine if you went to Costco and bought a 2 weeks worth of food, and someone else's kids came over and ate all your food, and your kids are sitting there like, So that's literally what it is. And so we have to find these ways to, one, understand that first of all, and two, have business models and social interaction that can say, okay, we can make these things offset. It's not a liability purely. We can make it an asset. And have a way in which we can interact around it. But I appreciate you coming on. And again, this is a very unique conversation for us. on this podcast, it's what we do every single day because all we do is work with owner-operated producers. So we're kind of exposing a piece of that. But tell people where they can find you, how you want them to connect with you. If there's landowners out there who are, in the agricultural world who feel like, hey, I want it. Yes, of course, we love the actual ag. Most people love the actual work of the ag operation, whether it be ranching or farming, but they want to feel like we are not where we should be financially, and we want to figure that out. Like, how should they connect with you?
Awesome. Well, Nic, thanks very much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. It's always fun to have these types of conversations with people that are willing to have good conversations. We have a website, www.ranchrightllc.com, and right is spelled like your right hand. So RANCHRIGHT You can contact us there. We have, under the same name, we have an Instagram and a Facebook and a LinkedIn profile. On that page is a link for a discovery call. So if somebody wanted to know more about how we could work together to help them improve their business, they can get on with our gal, Mimi Argyle, who ranches in Idaho and Wyoming, and she'll visit with you and see if there's the potential for us to help. Our main currency, if you will, is our goal is for our customers to be more successful, or as successful as they want to be. Most of us have a reason for owning a ranch or a farm. We have things we're trying to achieve with that, and most of us are falling short. And our job as a company is to help people achieve their goals. So to a certain degree, of the lion's share degree, our success comes from their success. Most of the people that work in our company either grew up in or are still actively working in ag. So we have a lot of familiarity there. We only work in one industry. We only do ranching and farming. That's it. We occasionally will do a fence business if it's owned by a ranch or a farm, but we're very, very single focused. Our goal is to absolutely be the expert in that, how to help you improve your business, how to make more money. Everybody in ranching and farming works hard. I know we have this wonderful thing about the gentleman farmer in East Texas that owns 30 acres and has 10 cows like that. Okay, those guys might be a tenant on the side or something, yeah. But anybody that works full-time in ag is working really hard. And the saddest thing to me is to see people like my uncle who work very, very hard for decades of their life, only to sort of have it all not meet the mark in the end. And I can't imagine anything more heartbreaking than spending my whole life in pursuit of a goal and missing it is one thing, but not even getting on the target, being so far from it that it won't work. Now, if my goal is to be an all-star in the NBA, that ain't happening. That's an unreasonable goal. But one of the things we know is that most of us, for our goals, we want to have a reasonably profitable ranch that is a good enough business that our children want to return to it. That's not an unreasonable goal at all. That's incredibly achievable in all but the strangest situations. And so we really have the ability to help people get there. And if people want that sort of help, that is what we want to do. Our team loves to help people.
Awesome.
They love to see our clients be successful. They love to see the improvement that happens over time. And our goal is to establish a long-term relationship with a lot of trust where we can just continue to help people grow that through generations.
Great. All right, John. Well, that's a great place to end it. I really appreciate you coming on, and we will put links and stuff to what we talked about to connect with you guys.
Hey, fantastic. Thanks, Nic.
Hey, by the way, if you're a landowner and you're interested in potentially listing on LandTrust, it's super easy and free to get started. You can go to landtrust.com/landowners. And we've got a bunch of video testimonials of other landowners who've been with us for years. We've got FAQs, all that fun stuff. There's a contact information there. You can text or call our team. And we're happy to get you started. We'll do all the heavy lifting. It'll be very easy. And if you're a sportsman and you still haven't created a free LandTrust profile, that's crazy. Take 15 seconds. Go and create your free LandTrust profile. Tell us what you're interested in, whether it's hunting or fishing, what species you are interested in, what state you live in, what states you're interested in. And we are like a free 365-day a year scouting tool for you. So we will send you new properties and packages that match your interests. So kind of like Zillow, if you've ever used an app like that where you tell them what kind of house you're looking for and they just constantly send you houses that match that, we're doing the same thing. You tell us what kind of outdoor experiences you're interested in, we send you a bunch of them, and you can see what looks interesting to you. So do take 15, 20 seconds, create a free account. Well, that's it for us this week. Thank you for joining, and
like, comment, subscribe, all the fun stuff, and share this episode with friends if you found it interesting at all. Thanks.